with our standard reports, we've created the reports to basically try to cover every area that you're going to need. Occasionally, you're going to need a little extra additional help with these, okay? And that's fine. And we'll get to that custom reports module in just a second here. But for the most part, with our standard reports, like I said, we've tried to cover all bases. So if there's a specific kind of report I'm looking for, maybe my main focus is outbound calls or inbound calls, or maybe it's I want to focus specifically on users, right? Or what we refer to as agents. Or maybe I want to see calls for specific groups. So like I said, we've tried to focus on all areas. If I want to find a specific kind of report, there's kind of three things I can do. The first is up here in this search bar, if I type in kind of the main idea or the main topic. So like I said, let's say I want to do outbound calls. All right, so I type in outbound, and here I have 4 options for outbound reports. Okay, well maybe I want to see inbound calls. Okay, we'll type in inbound, and there you go. You have a few extra options. Okay, maybe I want to see agent reports. There you go. Type in agent, and there's your agent report. So you can filter that way. You can also use what we refer to as a filter tag. These are my filter tags. If I want to find agent reports, there's an option called agent right here. I can click on that, and it shows me, oh, there's all of your agent reports. Occasionally, I can click on multiple of these tags and it will still show me reports. Occasionally, reports belong to more than just one category. So for example, if I select agent and group, it shows me that I have 2 reports that fit both categories. Okay, so it doesn't do that with all of them, but if there's a specific style of report I want to see, like I said, I can go ahead and click on any one of these and it will take me to the reports that fit that specific category. Okay. Dominic, just really quick, I would actually recommend calling into our support staff once we're finished. They're probably going to have, and feel free to ask those questions on the training today, right? I mean, I can answer specific questions, but I would just recommend if you're maybe running into issues or you have extremely specific questions, then I would recommend calling into our support staff. But that would probably be my best recommendation to you, okay? But like I said, feel free to ask those questions on the training today. Maybe I can answer those for you while we're going through here. Okay. All right. So with this here really quick, awesome, thanks. So after you've kind of done those things there, the other thing you can do is you can just go through this list of reports. Like I said, in the name of the report, we've tried to kind of specify what it is. Right, so for example, I'll show you one of our most popular reports, the agent call summary, which is right here. If I click on that, over here to the right-hand side, I get kind of like an overview or kind of a sample of what that report might contain, okay? Now, the reason why we do this is because as you click on that report and you get that sample, pay attention to the column headers. The column headers are going to be specific to what this report is going to give you, right? So those are accurate. The reason I mentioned that they're accurate is because occasionally what happens is we'll actually get calls in our support staff. We'll say, okay, look, they'll call in and say, hey, look, I clicked on the agent call summary. I don't know who any of these people are. And on top of that, look at these numbers. Inbound calls, 12, 35 outbound calls, 23 internal calls, total calls, 143. That clearly does not add up. Keep in mind, with the exception of the column headers, everything else on here, names, numbers, that kind of stuff, that is just filler information until I actually run the report. So right now, we put the column headers there. That's really kind of what this is for, but we filled this in with filler information because it would look funny if we didn't have anything else there. Okay, so that's just one thing to keep in mind. Don't let that freak you out. You might run the report and once you run the report, you'll actually see the accurate information. But for the time being, as you click on the reports, it'll just show you filler information until you actually run that report. Okay. Now, I want to talk about a couple reports today. Let's talk really quickly about abandoned calls because this is something that we do get occasionally asked about, either on this training session or in our support staff. The abandoned calls report is strictly looking at your abandoned calls for your groups. What is an abandoned call? Well, let's break this down for you for just a second here. The question we get most frequently is, what's the difference between a missed call and an abandoned call? Well, a missed call is any call that rings to my extension and I don't answer it. That's going to count as a missed call for me, okay? An abandoned call, on the other hand, is any call that does not end with talking or a voicemail. If the final event is something other than talking or voicemail, it will be considered an abandoned call. So that might be things like a hold event or a queue event, a park event, if you're familiar with park. Okay, so anything that is not, if it ends in anything other than a talking event or a voicemail event, that is going to be considered an abandoned call. Okay. Abandoned calls can be calls that at one point were answered. I'll give you a scenario here. Let's say, for example, you call in to me. I answer and I say, hey, this is Blake with Xima Software. Can you hold, please? And you say, sure thing, because you're a nice person. At that point, I put you on hold, and I'm not that nice of a person because at that point, I let you sit on hold for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, finally passes, and you're like, look, I don't want to do this anymore, so you hang up. So that means that call was at one point answered, but it was abandoned at the same time because, again, it did not end with talking or a voicemail. Okay, so this report tends to kind of freak people out because they're going to see this answered column. They say, hold on, abandoned calls aren't answered. They can be. Again, it just means that it was a call that did not end in talking or a voicemail. Okay, so let's talk about how to run a report. Now, before I run that report, I do want to kind of point out one or two things. The first thing I'll point out is this up here in the top right-hand corner. This is what we refer to as the overall summary. Okay, the overall summary basically just gives me a grand total. Okay. Then down here, we get line by line. And this report in particular, this abandoned calls report, I'll kind of explain this a little bit further in detail in the style of report that it is in just a minute. But each line on this report is going to count as one individual call. So each line is its own call, and it's showing the details for that call. Okay, so that will come up to play in just a minute here. For right now, let's go ahead and do this. To run this report, all I have to do is answer these few questions right down here in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay. First thing is report time frame. It wants to know what time frame I want to see. Now, the great thing about Chronicall reports is that I can actually run these from the point that Chronicall was installed up until the present point in time. So if I want to run a report from 3 years ago, if Chronicall was installed 3 years ago, yeah, I can go back and run a report from 3 years ago. Okay. I don't want to do that. That would take a really long time at this point because this is not an actual live Chronicall, and so it probably wouldn't work in general. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and select my time frame. I can do a day, I can do an entire week, I can do the entire month, whatever I prefer. All I have to do is select the first day and the last day, and that will be considered my time frame. Well, for today's purpose, I just want to run it for one day, so I'll go ahead and run it for this past Monday. I do have this advanced option as well. Advanced allows me to be more specific with my time frames. By default, Chronicall looks at 24 hours a day. Well, maybe I want to see just my business hours or just a specific time of day. Maybe I have an agent that isn't performing, very well, and I want to see when they're here, their business hours or their work hours. Okay, so I can do a little bit of tweaking here. So, for example, right here where it says time of day, again, like I said, by default is 24 hours. Well, I don't want 24 hours. I want to see 8 to 5 or 8 to 10 a.m., something like that, right? So you can adjust that however you want to. The other thing I'll mention here is, let's say, for example, I want to see every Monday and every Wednesday of the month. Well, for me to do that, let's say I say Monday and Wednesday, you'll notice it just kind of highlights everything in between. Well, I don't want to do that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say Monday and Wednesdays up till now, but here's how I do that. I come in here and hit into advanced, and right here where it says days of week, yes, I've selected the entire month so far, but I'm just going to say Monday and Wednesday. So yes, the entire month is selected, but this way it's only going to report on those 2 days, Monday and Wednesday, from the entire month. Okay, so you have a little bit more flexibility there that you can work with. Otherwise, look, most people, they just like to see 24 hours because sometimes they want to see what happened after hours or before hours, whatever that might be. So we'll go ahead and select just the 15th for now and then hit OK. Now this is a group report, so I'm going to select which group or groups I want to be found on this report. So I can either do just one or I can do all of them, whatever. It's actually going to show me which group the call was involved with, so you can select multiple groups. For now, I'll just say customer service. And then from there, I also have the option to do charts. Charts are just graphs. If I want to see a visual representation of those column headers through a graph, then I can. We can do line charts, pie charts, and bar charts. This is kind of a weird report. There's really nothing I can report on with these charts other than call duration. I can't really do a chart on final agent or final event, something like that. So we're just going to use these for now. I can adjust these however I want to. Okay, I can make them bigger, make them smaller. I'm actually going to make this one a little bit bigger here. Or at least, oh, it doesn't want to work for me there. Come on. Oh, that's okay. It is fine how it is. That's fine. From there, I've got my chart selected, and now what I can do is I can come down here and select my format, PDF, Excel spreadsheet, HTML, or comma-separated value. Now, before I hit Run Report, there's one last thing I want to mention, and that is this. I mentioned there was a second way to tell if you have custom reports. So here it is. Right here where it says report skin. Report skin gives me the ability to not just change my report as far as the values go, right? That's what one thing that custom reports allows me to do. I can change the values to reflect exactly what I want to see. But the other thing I can do is I can change completely how that report looks. Okay, so that's what report skin allows me to do. If you see this report skin line here, that means you have custom reports. Again, if you don't have report skin, then you don't have custom reports. Okay. All right, from this point, all I have to do now is hit run report, and that's it. That's how I run a report. Very, very simple to do. Okay. There's my report. It shows me I had 4 calls. Apparently my charts didn't grasp, but that's okay. They're not as important on this report anyway. But I can see how many calls I had abandoned, and then I can, of course, see the line-by-line details. Each line, again, represents its own call, and so I can see the details of what took place on those calls. Okay. So that's how I run a report. Any questions about running a report? Okay. All right, now there is one last thing I'll mention with running a report. I'm not going to go to it in full detail today. I do have an article on this on our guide site if you want to know more about this. Or again, of course, you can also just jump into my Tuesday training next week if you've not done so far, or up to this point. One last thing I can do with this is I also have the ability to schedule these reports. So I can schedule these reports to run automatically, and I can have them send directly to my email. So if there's a specific email address I want this to go to, I can come in here and type in what that is. If I want this to go to multiple people, I can just put a comma after each email, and I can put in the name of the individual that I'd like that to go to. Okay. If I want this, and this is another question I get occasionally, is, hey, if I have a group email, right? Let's say, for example, I've got a sales team or a customer service team, something like that, and they're all listed under one email, right? Customer service at email.com. Can I do that? Yes, absolutely. As long as that email is set up to go to all those individuals that you want that to go to, then absolutely you can use that. That's not a problem. Okay. All right, so like I said, I'm not going to go into this any further for today's purposes and also just for time purposes, but the answer, if you have questions, if can I schedule a report to run automatically, daily, hourly, weekly, monthly? Absolutely. Okay. All right. Now, I just did this just a second ago, but just to make sure, are there any questions about running reports? Okay. Perfect. Well, good then. Let's go ahead and get into the fun stuff then. Let's talk about custom reports. Now, with custom reports, there are 3 things that I can do. Okay. Yeah, no problem. The way to access that again, there's actually 2 ways to access the ability to schedule reports, but the easiest way is actually to right click on the report itself and then just go down to schedule report. Okay. So that's the easiest way. You can also go on our main menu under Chronicle. Sorry, the question, guys, I forgot to mention the question. The question is, show me one more time how to access the schedule report. The other way to do that is if you go to the reports section on the main page of Chronicall, there's the option here to schedule report as well. Okay, and I can just hit new schedule, select the report I want to run, and I can go from there. Okay, all right, good question. Okay, now again, with custom reports, there's kind of 3 things I can do. I can create my own reports from the ground up. I can edit any of those existing standard reports. So if there's a report on here that I'm like thinking, you know what, this is really close to what I want, can I change it? Absolutely. If you have custom reports, you can edit any of these existing reports. And of course, that third thing that you can do is you can create the report skin. Okay. So let's start with the most complicated. Let's talk about how to create a report from the ground up. To do this, it's actually really pretty simple. But here's my one biggest piece of advice for all of you today. If you're going to build a report, know before you go, right? Know what you want to see on that report before you build the report. Because when I go to build that report, I'm going to select the kind of report I want to build, and then it's going to give me a whole list of options that I can use. And if I don't know ahead of time what it is I want to see on the report, then it's going to be a little difficult for me to well, it's not difficult. It's just going to take more time. We'll put it that way. Okay, so know before you go. That will help you when you're building the report. All right, so let's do that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come here where it says create report. In this list now, I'm going to be giving multiple options. I can create an agent report. Remember, agent to us is a word that represents users or extensions, kind of depending on how you look at those, okay? Users or extensions. From there, we can also do things like group reports, or we can do we can do time interval reports. I could go through all of these and kind of talk about what each one represents, but for time's sake today, here's what I want to do. If I want to know what kind of report it is that I'm going to create, I need to understand what kinds of categories, or what three categories. There's three categories of reports. What category do these reports styles fit into? So let's walk you through really quickly the three different categories. And if you're not taking notes, I do recommend doing this right now, just because, or at least taking notes right now, because this might get just a little overwhelming for just a second, and then I will make it much easier. I'll clarify it and make it a little bit easier for you. Okay, but let's get the confusing part done first. Now, if I want to know what kind of report this is, I need to look here at this column. This column is what we refer to as our rows column, R-O-W-S, rows, okay, because each one is a row. So here's my rows column. This will tell me what kind of report it is I'm going to create. Let's give you some background here. Let's come back to the standard reports really quick. Let's talk about our first style of report, or our first category of report, and on top of that, it's actually the most common. And this is what we refer to as a summary report, okay? Now, summary reports in our standard reports are actually really easy to find because they all have the word summary right in the title. You'll notice there are a lot of different summary reports. Okay. Well, what is a summary? Well, a summary is just that. It's a total. It's a summary of information. So here, the agent call summary report is actually one of our most popular reports. What it does is it shows me how many calls my users are involved with. So Alyssa Rodriguez had how many inbound calls, outbound calls, internal calls, including things like missed calls. Okay, summary reports are just totals of information. And again, like I said, they're also the most common style of report. Well, if I come back to the create report window here, if you look in this list, there is not a summary option. So what am I going to do? How am I going to know what kind of report this is going to be? Again, look at this column right here. This column will signify what kind of or what style of report this is going to be. So if this is a summary report, you're going to see a handful of things. And I'm going to show you some of those things here. Okay, and that's where it gets a little bit overwhelming for just a second. But as I explain the other two categories, it will make that much easier to understand. So here we go. What am I going to see if this is a summary report? Well, in this column, one of the first things I'm going to see is I might see a user name or an agent name. Okay, so if I ever see an agent name, this is a summary report, meaning it's going to give me totals. If I ever see a group name, same thing. It's going to be a summary report, meaning it's going to give me totals for the group or groups. Okay, and just kind of side note here, when I say group, I'm talking about your phone system groups. Occasionally they're referred to as hunt groups or work groups. Okay, so those are just a couple things to keep in mind here. So if I ever see a group name, again, like I said, it'll be a summary report. If I ever see a call direction, inbound, outbound, internal, that is going to be a summary report. If I ever see a caller ID, now that one's going to get confusing in just a minute here, but caller ID. Caller ID is the name of the person that we're speaking to. Okay. If I ever see a phone number, that could be an external phone number. It could be a local phone number. But if I ever see a phone number, again, it's going to be a summary report. Now I'll show you one last one here. This is for those of you that have our agent dashboards module. If you ever see an account code here, that is going to be a summary report. Okay. Now there are a few more, but those are the main ones. Those are the most popular. So let me kind of just go through those again. If you ever see an agent name, group name, caller ID, meaning the name of the person calling, a phone number, call direction, I don't remember if I said that one, or an account code. Those are all going to be summary style reports. Okay, again, meaning they're going to give you summaries of information. Now let's make this a little bit easier on you. Let's talk about the other two categories. The second category, I'll use kind of to illustrate to illustrate this. I'll use that kind of this report right here. This is again a summary report. I can see this here. This is showing me again as the agent call summary how many calls my users are involved with. Well, let's say Alyssa Rodriguez. I can see here that it says she has 39 inbound calls. Well, that's great. I love that she has 39 inbound calls. But what if I want to see each one of those 39 calls in a report? Well, I'll use this one right here. This is called the Agent Inbound Calls Report. The Agent Inbound Calls Report is going to say whoever, I forget her name. We'll say Andrea. I forget her name. Short memory. Andrea, so we would see her name here, and then we would see total calls 39. And then we would see 39 lines here. This is what we refer to as a detailed report because it shows more detail. Another very popular report was that one I showed you earlier, the Abandoned Calls Report. Each line is its own specific call. It's a detailed report. Now, the benefit of some of these detailed reports is this. With this report here, let's say, for example, I see this call and I'm like, oh, I want to know more about what happened here. Well, I can actually copy this call ID. A call ID is an ID for the call in our Chronicall database. It's not caller ID, right? And that's why caller ID can be kind of confusing. Call ID is a number that is associated with this phone call in our database. So I can actually, if I want to know more about this call, I can copy this number here, take it to Cradle to Grave for the same day and search for that call using that call ID, and that will allow me to see that call in full detail, showing me all of the details. Hence the name, a detailed report. Okay. So detailed reports are just more detailed. Let me kind of show you here in this list of report types what you're going to see. There's actually only 3 options for detailed reports. That's number 1, call. And apologies, I can't zoom in on this, so if it's kind of small, I do apologize. But you'll see here it says call ID. Okay. The second one is event. You'll notice event ID. The third is feature. You'll notice feature ID. If you ever see the word ID in this column, it is a detailed report. Okay, so again, they just provide more detail. Rather than just a summary or a total, it's showing me the detailed information for each call. Okay. Last style of report. This is what we refer to as a time interval report. Now I'm going to select up here for the filter tags. We actually have 1 for time intervals. There's only a handful of these, but time interval reports actually in all reality are summary reports. They are summaries of information. The problem is, or not the problem, but the difference is here in this column, I'm not seeing a username, group name, call direction, anything like that. What I'm seeing is a time interval. So for example, this inbound call performance, this report here is great at showing me, hey, how are we performing overall during certain times? Now these time interval reports can be run for various different time intervals. I can do this for hours of day, minutes of hour, months of year, days of week, days of month. You've got all these different options here that I can use to see how we're performing during certain times. This is almost like a schedule management type thing, you could say. I mean, it's not necessarily, but you could use it to say, okay, we're busiest during these times, so let's make sure we schedule more people. Or we're slowest during these times, let's make sure we schedule fewer people, whatever that might be. Time interval reports really, at the end of the day, are summary reports, but they're reporting on different time intervals rather than saying a group or a username here. Okay. When creating a summary or a time interval report, there's only one option, and that's time. So if I want to create a time interval report, select time. If I want to create a detailed report, select call, event, or feature. Everything else is a summary report. Okay. Hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for you. But this will help you, like I said, determine what kind of report it is or what kind of information it is that you are trying to gather. Okay. Are there any questions on that? Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, let's do the fun stuff. Let's go ahead and create a couple reports. Now, I want to create 2 today. We'll create one right now, and then we'll come back in just a little bit and create a second one. But for right now, let's do one of the most popular, which is an agent report. Agent, again, represents user or extension. So in this list here, I would see, or in my column here, I would see the names of the users that I've selected to see on this report. Now, we'll do that in a minute. Right now, we're not worried about that. Like I said, this is just filler information for right now. Okay, let's do this. Once I select the style of report it is that I want to create, I come down here to the bottom and I hit next. From here, this is where it gets very simple and somewhat complicated at the same time. And again, this is kind of where I recommend coming in here and already knowing what it is that you want to see on the report, because from here, this is now where I build it. All I have to do is hit add. Once I hit add, I'm going to get a window that pops up and it's going to give me a list of options that I can now use to create my report. Now, I will mention this as kind of a little side note. These values that you see in this list will be different depending on the style of report that I'm creating. Okay, an agent report is going to be different from a call detail report. So keep that in mind. These will be different. Now, I currently am working on building a list of every single, going through each style of report. So agent, I'm going to have a list of explanations and examples of what each of these means. That's going to take me a bit, so bear with me for a while. We're going to have those created hopefully here in the next couple months. Okay, because it's a kind of an undertaking. But we're going to have that so that we can make this a little bit easier on you, make it more clear. Okay, but at this point, now that I know what I want to see on my report, all I have to do is go through and select what it is I want to see. So let's take, for example, call count. I want to see a count of calls on my report. So I select that and then I hit OK, and boom, there it is on my report. Really simple. Hit add again. What else do I want to see? Well, I want to see how many calls were transferred by the agent. Hit OK, there it is. How many calls were transferred to that agent? Hit OK, there it is. How many calls, let's see, had a specific event? Here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. Let's take event count. Okay, now I want to see how many calls had a specific event. Well, what event is it that I want to see? Because right now this is just generic, hey, okay, this call had events on it. Good, okay. But I want to be more specific. So this is now where I get to come over here and use some of my filters. Now we kind of have 3 levels of filters. We have required criteria, general criteria, actually 4 levels, I apologize. Required criteria, general criteria, event level criteria, and call level criteria. Now you may not use all of these, and that's fine. You have to at least use the required criteria section. There's 2 options for this one. That's column header, in other words, the name of what it is, and the event type. As this is an event count, what event do we want to see? Well, let's come over here and select this ellipsis tool here, and it's going to pop up with a list of options for us. So in this list, we have every kind of feasible event that you would see for a call in Chronicall. I want to see how many hold events these users have had. Okay, so I'll select hold and then hit OK. Right? And then I can come in here and change the name to this. I'm just going to call this hold count. Now I'm going to come back and do something again with this in just a minute here. For right now, I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK, and now we see hold count. So that's one thing I can do. I can change, or I can tell this what event I want to see. Now I don't have to do anything other than that for that specific value. I will in just a minute. I want to do something else with that, but for right now, I'm going to move on to another item. Let's come back to this call count option. Call count. There it is right there on my report. It's the first thing on the report. I'm going to hit edit. And I want to know, first of all, call count. Now, I have a pretty good idea of what that means, but I want to know for sure. So as it's selected as call count here, I'm going to come over here and click this description tab. And that's going to show me, well, this is going to show me the total number of calls, inbound, outbound, and internal associated with the given agent. Well, that's neat, but that's too broad. That's not specific enough for what I want to see. So I'm going to make a couple changes. Come back in here to this call count tab, and I'm going to change the name to this first. I want to see, it's going to be kind of vague for just a second. I'm going to call this inbound greater than 3. Super vague, right? The way we like to keep it. Okay. So that's what my new event, or my new column is called, but what does that mean? Well, let's do this. First of all, this is only going to count inbound calls. That's the only thing I want it to count. So I have to tell it, just count inbound calls. So in my filters here, I'm going to scroll down where it says call level, and it's going to give me this option, call direction. I'll come in here and say inbound. Great. Now it's only looking at inbound calls. But again, we've got this ambiguous inbound greater than 3. Well, what does that mean? Well, here's what I want. I want this to give me a count of inbound calls that have a talking event greater than 3 minutes. That's what that means. So, okay, we need to tell this what event to look at. So event level, there's event type again right there. This time, instead of saying hold, we're going to come down here and say talking. Okay. So we've got my inbound calls with a talking event, but again, there's that greater than 3 tool. All right, well then we're going to come back down under call level again, and we're going to look for event duration. Okay, my event is that talking event. Here's event duration right here. And in fact, I'm going to change this to say greater than or equal to 3 minutes. Maybe. It didn't want to work for me. There we go. Okay, so there's 3 minutes. So now I have a new value. It's still call count. I built it through call count, but now it's only going to be counting inbound calls with a talking event greater than or equal to 3 minutes long. From there, I can hit OK, and now that event is on my report, or that column is on my report. Okay, that doesn't change it permanently in this list of options here. No, it's just for this specific report, for this specific value. That's what I did for that specific report and value. Okay. So the idea behind custom reports is this. You can go through, and just use these ones that we already have existing for you. That's fine. But if you want more flexibility here, the idea behind custom reports is that this is your report, meaning you can create this report to reflect exactly what it is that you want to see, right? Of course, you can leave it at those Chronicall values. What does answered calls mean? Again, well, I'll select answered calls and it will show me. But guess what? For my company, maybe my service level agreement says that I only count calls as answered if they were answered in greater than or equal to, less than or equal to 10 seconds. So it still says answered calls, but it's got my definition. Okay, so that's kind of the beauty behind this. And I want to move this up. I'm going to move this next to inbound calls. Right there. There we have it. Okay. Questions on this so far? Okay. All right. I want to do one more thing. I mentioned we were going to do something else with hold count. So let's do that. Let's hit edit here. I've already got hold count selected, but I'm going to add something to this. Maybe my company, kind of going back along the same lines as with that service level agreement, right? I'm going to say, look, I only want to see, I want to see hold count, how many calls they've had with a hold count, but I want to see a column threshold. Let me show you what I mean by that. I want this to change color when they hit a certain point, right? If they get into the danger zone, I want it to turn a specific color. So I'm going to go say anything greater than 8 is going to be yellow, and anything, well, let me rephrase that. Anything between 8 and 15 is yellow. Anything 15 and above is red, meaning that they've gone over their limit of how many calls they can have on hold. Okay, so we can change that. We can hit OK there, and now we can see those numbers, the colors of the numbers have changed. I am super colorblind, so me personally, I like to come back in here, and instead of doing the number, I like to personally do the background color because it makes it easier for me to see. Okay, kind of ugly, but hey, look, it gets the point across, right? So if a call is greater than or equal, or excuse me, if there's greater than 8, less than 15, it's going to be yellow. If it's greater or 15 and greater, it's going to be red. Okay, so you can do things like this. Now, there's one last major thing I want to show you, and that is this. Maybe in this list of options here, maybe I don't see the specific value that I'm looking for, or maybe I want to do a comparison, right? I want to see, okay, out of the calls, let's say, for example, out of the calls we've had presented, how many have we answered within the time frame or within the service level agreement, right? So I can do something like that, but that doesn't exist here right now. So I need to create it. I'm going to create my own formula right here. I'm going to call this Blake's. I have such a hard time with that. There we go. Blake's Service Level Agreement, SLA. Now, again, I wanted to see. I wanted to kind of see the different or the total percent, we'll say, of how many calls were answered within that time frame, based upon how many calls were presented. So, or compared to how many calls were presented. So, I'm going to do this. I'm going to come in here and say Add. And I get to choose again from these values. Now I'm going to start with answered calls. And again, I'm going to tweak that to represent my service level agreement, which is, again, anything that was answered within less than or equal to 10 seconds. Okay, great. There's value number 1. That's my first value. But now I need to create the formula. I need to give it something to be compared against. So let's go ahead and say add again. And I'm going to go ahead and say presented calls. In fact, I can even just type that in up here. Presented. There we go, right there. Okay, that one I'm not going to change anything on. I'm just going to leave that as is. There we have it. So here's my formula down here. Each little dollar sign right there represents the beginning of a new value. So value 0 is answered calls. Value number 1 is presented calls. And I need to do a comparison. So I'm going to go ahead and put a division symbol there. And I can also choose how I want that displayed. I'm going to go ahead and say %. I can test that formula, make sure it works. Formula is valid. Perfect. Hit OK. Hit OK. And that value or that formula that I've just created is now part of my list of options here. I can use this on future reports as well. So I've created the value. It'll tell you that it's created because it says formula next to it, meaning I've created it. But now it is something I've permanently created here that I can use on further or on reports in the future. Now, of course, if I'm done with that, I can hit remove and get rid of it. But for right now, I'm just going to keep it and we'll go ahead and put that on my report. And there we go. Okay. So that is working with the values. The hardest thing about custom reports is trying to translate. What is it that I'm looking for? And then once I know what I'm looking for, where is that in that list of options? Right, so that'll probably be the most difficult part of this. But if you kind of go through things slowly, take a look at things and really kind of assess what it is you want to see, then that typically will help. Okay. I know I asked this just a few minutes ago, but just to double check, before I move on here, any questions about this? Okay. Once I've finished creating my report, I've added my values here. All I have to do now is hit next. Once I hit next, it's now going to say, okay, well, what do you want to add? Do you want to add that overall summary to the top of the report? Sure, let's go ahead and add total inbound calls, total answered calls, and you'll notice that they'll just appear as I click on them. Total calls transferred by, total calls transferred to, total hold count, and average SLA. And there we go. From there, we can hit next, and now it's going to say, well, what do you want to call this report? Well, I want to call this Blake's Custom. Okay, maybe it'll catch up eventually. Okay, so you can name the report. You can also choose the orientation for that report. Wow. You can also choose that orientation for the report. You can have it be portrait is default. Okay, but you can also have it be landscape if you prefer that instead. Sorry, this is going really slow for some reason. And then, of course, you also have the option for default parameter values. What does that mean? Well, let's back up for just a second. What's a parameter? These are parameters. Okay, the questions that you answer when you're running the report, those are parameters. So it's asking you right now, hey, do you want to answer those now, or do you want to wait until the report is finished? Right? Because maybe I'm not running this report right away. Maybe I'm going to hold off on it for a bit. I'm going to create it and then run that later. But maybe I am running it right now. And if that's the case, I can just answer those questions right now. What report time frame do you want to see? Well, I want to see last week. Okay. And on top of that, which users? Well, users is going to kind of give me two options, and I'll explain this a little bit further on my Tuesday trainings. We have roles. The grand, or just kind of like the overall arching theme on roles is that roles are Chronicall created groups that are separate from your phone system. Okay, so essentially it's just a list of users that I classify as a role. So if I say customer service team 1, I'll assign the users that I want to that customer service team 1. So that way I just have to select customer service team 1 rather than coming over here and selecting every single user that I want to see individually. For now, I am going to use one of those roles, and then we'll go ahead and hit OK. I have the option to choose how this is sorted. By default, it'll be ascending by agent. Maybe I want it descending by agent, or maybe I want it ascending by calls answered within less than 10 seconds. Who's answered the most calls within less than 10 seconds at the top? Again, I can also add my charts. Let's do this, this, and this. Perfect. And then from there, hit OK. And now, at this point, I can hit finish, and that report is now done. It's now done, and it's now going to be a part of my list of standard reports. I'll go ahead and there we go. And from here, all I have to do now is just hit run report. That's it, because I've already got my questions answered down here. Right? I just answered those. So now all I have to do is hit run report, and that report is going to go ahead and run. Now, it might not be very pretty. It might not have a lot of action to it. Yeah, look at that. Oh, we've only got, well, wow, we've got a couple people that have got a lot of hold events. Right? There you go. So there's your report. Okay, so that's how you create a report. Okay. And that, like I said, you can run that report just like you would any report, and you can schedule that report like you would any other report. Okay. So that is creating a report from the ground up. Okay. Now, the second portion of custom reports is actually editing a report. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on editing a report because honestly, editing is very, very similar to creating a report. But I will mention this. If you are trying to build a report, before you build one from the ground up, check our list of standard reports to see if you can find a report that most closely matches what it is that you're looking for. And the reason I say that is because, let's say, for example, I look at that agent call summary report and I think, oh man, this is really close to what it is I'm looking for, but it doesn't have everything on there. That's okay. If I find a report that closely matches, right-click on it and say Edit Report. That's going to give me three options. I can cancel, I can edit a copy, or I can edit the original. I always say edit a copy, right? Because as cool as I think I am, I can't say that I'm never going to need that original again. Okay, so I'll edit a copy of this report, but here's the benefit of this. I am not building this report from the ground up. This looks very similar to what we've just done, right? Here's the report, here's the builder window. Okay, I can see here, this already has these options here. Well, there's my answered calls. Guess what? I can hit edit after I select it, and it's going to pop up with that same window. And now again, I can come down here and I can say speed of answer less than 10. Right? Really easy. And that's I'm working with something I've already built, right? Or that's already been built. Okay, inbound calls, great. Well, let's change that one too. Remember, it's inbound calls. That's already selected for me. Okay. But now I need to say it needs to have that event type. Well, there's talking right there. And the event duration right here, greater than or equal to 3 minutes. Okay, so there we go. I've already got it built. I'm just making a couple changes to that. Okay, so if I could encourage you with anything today, that is this. Before you build a report, try to find a report that most closely matches what it is that you're looking for, because you're going to save yourself a lot of time not having to build a report from the ground up. But of course, you are more than welcome to. Okay, so either way works for me, whatever works best for you. Once I've finished building that report, I can now hit next, and it's going to say, hey, if you added anything new, do you want to add anything there? I haven't added anything new. I do want to add one thing. Let's go ahead and hit add, and let's add that service level agreement. There it is right there. Hit OK. And now we can come back in here again. It's going to say, hey, do you want to add that? Yeah, let's do that. Let's add that to the overall summary up here to the top. Hit next. What do you want to call this? I'll just leave it called copy of agent call summary, but I could change the name to that and then hit finish. And again, now that report is again part of my list of standard reports. Okay, there it is right there. And there's my new value on there, and it's going to have those changes that I made to it. But again, it's something that's already built, and that's easier for me to work with than building it from the ground up. Okay, so you can edit any report. Are there any questions about editing a report or creating a report from scratch? Okay, two more things I want to do. One of the things I want to mention really quick again is that report skin. Now, report skins are not necessary, right? Like a lot of people might look at it like, I don't need that. That's fine. Report skins allow me, other than sounding Silence of the Lambsy, allow me to basically go through and completely change the report, right? So not only do I have my values here that I've changed, but now I want to have it look like my company, right? So I've got a couple here that I work with occasionally. Here's one that I created for a friend, right? So you can change this to reflect your company completely. Change the header, change the colors, add your logo. Really simple to do. So you may or may not do this. That may not be important to you, but if it is, let me show you how to do this really quickly here. If I want to change that report skin, I click on my ellipsis down here at the bottom, and it's going to pop open with my report skin builder. Okay. Now the report skin builder, starting from the top, header color, that's this color right here. Notice here that there's a color code. I will tell you right now, if you can find out the color codes for the colors that you want on the report, it is much easier. And here's why. If I want to change this color, I just click on this ellipsis here. It pops open with my header color changer. My problem, again, is that I'm colorblind, right? So I can try to match it or try to get it as close as I want to the color that I want to use. But if I have that color code right here where it says RGB, I can come in here and actually type that code and make it exactly what it wants. I was actually really close there. Good for me. Anyway, so I can have it be the exact color that I want, right? So there's my header color, row label color. That's this, my column, and the column headers. So I can change the row label color as well. Again, I can try to eye it, or if I know that code, then I can come in here again and change that code. I think it's that one. That looks pretty good if it's not. Okay, so there we go, right? Font now is kind of weird. It's kind of hard to see. So we've got things like row label font. And you can go through and, like I said, change anything on here that you want if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and make that white. Makes it a little bit easier to see on the background there. Okay, so there we go. Now, the most important part of this, or the biggest reason why people use this, is because, again, they want to add their logo to this. So to add the logo or to change the header, this is the header right here, right? If I want to do that, I come here where it says header image and logo image. You might need to have someone build a header image for you. You can find some of these for free online, right? They're just not going to have your company colors unless you find one that's really close, okay? But maybe you have someone in your company that can do this for you, or they've already done something like this. If that's the case, I just come in here and change my header image. I've saved one that I use for this purpose here. So all I have to do now is get in here and find it. Try to remember where I keep it. I think it's in here. There it is right there. Okay, so that will change as soon as I select it. Again, on this builder here, it does it automatically for me. Now my logo is still there. It's just white. I don't want that one anymore, so I'll come here to logo image. Do the same thing. Save your logo somewhere. Once you've saved it, get in here and find it. And once I've found it, at that point, again, I now have my logo in place instead of the Xima logo. Now my problem here is that's really small. It's kind of in a weird spot. So that's where we have logo X, logo Y, and logo scale come in. I can change that logo scale here. I can either use these little arrows or I can type in the actual number. So maybe I want it to have it be something like that right there and hit enter, and that will size it for me. That's a good size right there. Logo X, logo Y. Logo Y moves it up and down, logo X moves it right and left. You guys are probably pretty familiar with that already, but I'm going to go ahead and change this one. I just want it to be right there. That looks pretty good. Maybe even down one a little bit, and then I can move it to the right and left if I want to. Okay, I do not like that actually. So there we go. There's my new report, right? It's got my logo, it's got my colors. Once I'm done with that, I just hit save as, and I can name it whatever I want. Lakes. Hit OK. I believe that's the first time I've spelled my name correctly. And then we can go ahead and hit close. And once I'm done with that, there's my new report skin. Okay, so pretty easy. It does take a little bit of practice, right? It does take some time. But the thing is again, this allows you to completely change that report so it completely reflects your company. Okay? Any questions there? Okay, perfect. All right, guys, I do want to create one last report. This will take just a couple minutes here, so forgive me. We just hit our hour mark. But give me just a few more minutes, and I'll show you how to create one more report. And the reason I want to show you how to create this last report is because it's going to have some advanced features, some things that you may or may not ever use, but I want to show you some advanced things with the custom reports. Okay, so let's create a separate kind of report. Let's come here again to create report. This time we're going to create a detailed report. We're going to create a call detail report. Remember, and I know it's detailed because over here it says call ID. That ID word represents that it's a detailed report. Same process. I hit next now, but here's the difference. I'm now going to get a new window that I have not seen before. We're going to come back to that. I'm actually going to skip it for now, and we'll go ahead and hit next again. And now we can build our report. Now, again, this one's not going to be super great. I'm just going to go through and choose a few values. But again, one more time, recognize or notice that these values are different from what we saw on that last report. Okay, so let's do this. I want to see caller ID. Great. Hit OK, and there it is. Caller ID is the name of the person calling, but I also want to see their phone number. So I'm going to use external party. That will show me their phone number as well. I want to see call direction. Great, hit OK. Let's see call duration. There it is right there. Really simple. Let's do this. I want to add the date to this report. I want to know what day and what time they called. So I'm going to come here where it says start time, and I'm going to change the name of this to date. Right here where it says format, I'm going to drop this down, and I'm going to go ahead up here, and I'm going to choose the date. Hit OK. Let's hit add again. Let's do 2 more. Let's now officially say start time, not only the date, but I want to see what time they actually called. And you can do something like this where it shows the date and time, but I personally like to separate it. There we go, hit OK. And let's do one last one, that's end time. And same thing, change that. So here it is, best report I've ever built. Wonderful. Okay, good. Now that that's done, I hit next. And it's going to say, hey, do you want to build that overall summary? Nah, I don't care about that one for this one. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finish, or I'm going to go ahead and name this. We're going to call this Blake's Detailed. And then from there, we can hit finish. Good. So there's my report. Nice and easy. It's done, right? It's, again, like I said, the best one I've ever built. It's got some really great information down there. It's actually kind of terrible. But at this point, here I can go now and run it. So we can come here to report time frame. Good. When do I want to see? Well, I want to see this for the 15th. I can select charts to add on there if I want to, but here is my problem now. Which users or which groups is this report looking at? Well, right now it's actually looking at every single group, every single user, every single call that took place on the 15th. Now that might be exactly what you're looking for, and that's great. Then you're done. But if I want to see calls involving specific users, I do not currently have that option. What that means is I need to create that option. So we're going to create what we refer to as a parameter, a new parameter. Remember that parameters are essentially just questions that I answer when I run the report. So I need to create the agent option or the group option. So how do I do that? Well, let's come back to the report. I'm going to go ahead and hit edit again. And it's going to take us back to that window that I skipped. I showed you that this was a new window. We skipped it. Here we are now. Okay, it's actually telling me now you don't currently have any row filters selected. So I need to create some row filters. Let's hit add filter. Now I have two options when doing this. The first is this. Let's say again, I do want to run this report for the specific agents. So I could come in here where it says agent, open up my ellipsis tool and just select the specific agents that I want to see on this report. The problem there is what if I want to represent or what if I want to run this report for different groups of agents? Okay. Maybe there's two separate groups or three separate groups and I want to run it on the different individual users. Well, if that's the case, if I select this right here, then it's only ever going to run it for that specific list of users. And if I want to run it for different users, essentially I'd have to come back in here and either create a separate report or edit the report again and change the list of users. I don't want to do that. That's too complicated. It's not that complicated. It just takes more time. So here's what I want to do instead. I'm going to create a parameter by doing this. Right here where it says agent, just next to it, right here in this blank section, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say create new parameter. I'll go ahead and leave it called agent and hit OK. What I've just done is this. We'll go ahead and hit next. I'm going to hit next a couple times here. So we'll hit next and then we'll hit next again. We'll come back to this window again because again, this is another new window. We'll come back to that, hit next, next, and now finish. And that report that I've just created will now give me the option to select, if I look here, I now have a new parameter for agent. I can now select which users I want this report to look at. Okay, I didn't have that before. Now I have the option to select which agents, meaning I can run this report from one list of agents. But if there's another list of agents I want to run this for, I can then get back in here, deselect those other agents, and now select the other list of agents and run it for those other agents as well. Okay, so we've created a parameter, but I've also created another problem. When I go to run this report, yes, I can select which agents, but if you'll look at my report here, there's not a list or not a column showing me which agents were involved with which calls. So right now, there's no way for me to know, well, which users were involved with this call or with this call, with this call. I don't know that. Now, I can add, I do have the option when I'm creating this report, I do have an option to show me calling agent and receiving agent. But a little bit easier is this. If I come back in here and edit this report one more time, we'll go back to that second window that I skipped. Okay, so we'll come over here. Come on. And one more, I think. Yep, there it is right there. So right now, this is selected as none. What does that mean? Well, that means it's not going to break it apart by agent for me. It's not going to show me which agents were involved with which calls. Yes, it is looking at the calls involving the agents that I have selected, but it's not telling me which ones were involved with which calls. So what I want to do is I actually want to create sub-reports. That means I'm going to go ahead and select agent, and I can see here now that it will separate it by agent for me. So when I select those agents to run that report, I have this sub-report section set up here, meaning it's going to separate it by agent. So if I select a handful of agents, it's going to break this report down by agent for me. So it'll show me agent 1, these are the calls involved with agent 1. Agent 2, these are agent 2's calls. So it will separate it by agent for me. Essentially, it's creating mini reports within the bigger report. Okay. Now I can actually do that with any report. Right. So if I create that agent report, but I also want to be able to select, I created that report earlier. I think I saved it. There it is right there. There's my custom right there. I can actually do the same thing here. Right now, it just shows me agents. I don't have the option to select groups. So what I can actually do is come back in here to edit that report. And I can come here, let's say, for example, inbound calls. I'm going to go ahead and hit edit here. And I want these calls to be tracked for a specific group. So right here where it says group, right click and create new parameter. Here's one called group. There it is. Okay, so I can do that basically on any report, and I now have an option when I go to run that report. I will now have an option now that says group as well for that report I just created. Okay, that's a little advanced. You may or may not ever use that. I have an article about that on our guide site as well, creating parameters. But that is how you do that. And that is essentially all I wanted to discuss with you guys. I went about 10 minutes over, so I do apologize. Are there any questions about this or anything else we've discussed today? Okay. I hope this has been a helpful session for you. Please let us know if you have any questions. Other than that, everybody, thank you so much. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, I hope so. You're welcome. Thank you, guys. Let me know if you need anything other than that. Have yourselves a great day. Okay?